Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtang Sthapitang Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayang Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Trinadapi Sunichena Tarot Iva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Hare Nama Hare Nama Hare Nama Hevakivalam Kalo Nastyeva 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 Gatiranyacha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We are now starting chapter 8 of Bhagavad-gita. In Sanskrit, it is called Akshara Brahma Yoga. The word Akshara has several meanings. Of course, the main one, the syllable Om, is called Akshara. But there are other meanings. It means unconditioned, infallible, indiminishing, indestructible, eternal, and absolute. And the word Brahma means spiritual in nature, can mean the transcendence, the supreme absolute truth. Prabhupada entitles chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. Please recite with me, Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Prabhupada says, chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. So the Supreme is under 3 different categories, as explained by the great sage Sutta Goswami. When speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, he quoted this verse, Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. The Supreme, or the Absolute Truth, is one substance, but is understood according to 3 different understandings or levels of appreciation. The first, Brahman, the all-pervasive spiritual energy which pervades everything. Everything, Kalvidang Brahma, Sarvam Kalvidang Brahma is the Vedic mantra. Everything is Brahman, spirit. Then the next highest realization of the Supreme, Param Atma, Krishna in the heart. We're going to hear a little bit about that in this first section of chapter 8. And then the ultimate feature of the Supreme is Bhagavan, the speaker of Bhagavad-gita. Bhagavan, possessor of all opulences, and he has them unlimitedly, and he has all of them simultaneously. That is the who is speaking Bhagavad-gita. In writing this Bhagavad-gita and including it in the Mahabharata, the Vyasadeva specifically, repeatedly says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, rather than Sri Krishna Uvacha, because he wants the reader to clearly understand that who is speaking this Bhagavad-gita? Bhagavan, the supreme, topmost authority. Okay, as I always do, each chapter is broken out into subsections. So the first 7 verses, Krishna answers 8 questions of Arjuna. Arjuna uvacha king tad brahma king abhyatmang king karma purushottama adibhutang cha king proktang adi daivam kim uchyate. Arjuna inquired, my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Adi yagya katang kotra dehesmin madhusudana prayana kale chakatang yeyosi niyatatmabi. Who is the Lord of sacrifice? And how does he live in the body, O Madhusudan? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So that final question for me is the most significant and most pertinent. How can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So now Krishna will begin to answer all of these 8 questions posed by Arjuna. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharang Brahma Paramang Swabhavodhyatman Uchyate Bhuta Bhavod Bhavakkaro Visarga Karma Sangyita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman. So this word Brahman can be explained in so many different ways depending on how it's being used. Here Krishna is giving the general basic answer. The living entity is Brahman, spirit, indestructible, transcendental living entity. We learned that in chapter 2 in 20 verses. And its eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. So we are eternal, not the body. The Jiva soul, the Brahman, is eternal. That was also explained in chapter 2. Never was there a time when you did not exist. That was, we should understand from the very beginning, you always existed. So your eternal nature is the self. Action pertaining to the development of material bodies is called karma, or fruitive activities. Again, this word karma can also be explained in different ways. This is the basic teaching. What is karma? It is an activity which will guarantee another material birth. Therefore, karma is not how you achieve liberation. Because liberation means not to acquire another material body. That's liberation. So any activity which is guaranteeing that I'll take another birth, that's called karma. Adhibhutang sharo bhava purushashchadi daivatam adi yagyoham evatra dehe dehabritang vara. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called adhibhuta, the material manifestation. So, it's constantly changing. That you see every day. It does not stay the same. Constantly changing. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. So this universal form of the Lord is a concept of meditation. And in that universal form of the Lord, all the various demigods are different limbs of that universal form of the Lord. What that also implies is that all the demigods are simply servants of God. They themselves are not God. They are servants of God. That is why we use the word demigod. They are on a very high elevated platform, greater than any human being, but still they are not equal to God himself, Krishna. They are servants. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the Supersoul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adi Yagya, the Lord of Sacrifice. So there are at least 5 different shlokas in the Bhagavad-gita where this point is made, that Krishna is the Supersoul in the heart. We learned last class, the demigods cannot benedict someone unless Krishna in the heart of the demigod dictates. First, the demigod has to take sanction from Krishna, then the person is benedicted. They are not independent. So, the Super Soul, Krishna in the heart, that's why it says, the Supreme Lord. Krishna is speaking to, I am that Super Soul. Now comes these next 2 verses, answers that last important question. These 2 verses are very prominent out of the 700 shlokas. Antakale chamam eva smaran muktva kalevaram yak prayati samad bhavang yati nastyatra sangshaya. And whoever at the end of life quits the body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. The classic example, Ajamila. Ajamila had been a sinful rascal throughout his whole life. But at the crucial moment, when the Yamadutas were coming to take him to hell, he simply chanted, Narayan! And that saved him. That alone saved him. So this verse here, Krishna is speaking. This is something that you should always remember. That if you're able to remember Krishna exclusively at the point of death, what does it say? You attain my nature. Not that you become Krishna, but you attain Krishna's nature. What is Krishna's nature? Sat, Chit, Ananda. You regain your eternal status, meaning no more birth and death, meaning you become liberated and go to the spiritual world. That's the first thing. Sat, eternal existence. Chit, you become full of knowledge, meaning you understand what is God and you understand who you are as well. And then Ananda, the beautiful word Ananda. Ananda means ever increasing happiness. Unlike Sukha, Bhagavad-gita later on in chapter 18, we will learn about the three kinds of Sukha or happiness. Happiness in ignorance, passion, and goodness. But all three have a beginning, middle, and end. But Ananda is different. Ananda is spiritual and it has no end. And it's always increasing. So if that is Krishna's nature, Krishna does not die. Krishna is always existing. Krishna is fully conscious of himself. And Krishna's pleasure is always increasing. And you will also achieve that same nature if you remember Krishna at the time of death. That's why we practice remembering Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There are a billion reasons why we chant Hare Krishna. Here's one of the most important. We are practicing so that at the time of death, automatically we'll remember Krishna. And you can test yourself. You can see for yourself how practiced you are. You're driving in the car. Somebody cuts you off. What comes out of your mouth? That'll tell you whether or not you are practiced. Because if coming out of your mouth is some profanity, then you need to do more practice. But if out of your mouth somebody cuts you off, Hare Krishna, that means you have done your practice. Because death can come just like that, bam! At any moment, we have to be ready. Therefore, we practice every day. Just like an athlete practices his sport every day for hours. We are spiritual athletes. And what are we practicing? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yang vapi smaran bhavang, tyajati anti kalevaram, tang tam evaiti kaunteya, sadatad bhava bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when one quits one's body, O son of Kunti, that state one will attain without fail. So this is the science of death. This is science. Krishna is telling you, whatever thoughts are there in your heart at the time of death is going to indicate your next life. The classic example, Bharata. What was Bharata meditating on at the time of death? He had become attached to a little deer. And at the time of death, instead of thinking of Krishna, he was thinking of a deer, and therefore he took the body of a deer. So we have to be careful. What is our mental culture throughout the day? That's why we do regular chanting, so that the mind is trained up, practiced. Otherwise, if you're thinking of something other than Krishna, that's what's going to determine your next life. This next verse is the, how can you say, the verse to live by. This next verse is how we should have as our life's motto. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudyacha Mayarpita mano buddhir, mam evaishyasi asangshaya. Therefore, so whenever this word therefore means, so many things have been stated, now comes the conclusion. Krishna is concluding, therefore Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna. 2 hands, holding a flute, beautiful Krishna. And at the same time, carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. Because Krishna is speaking directly to Arjuna, and Krishna wants Arjuna to engage in this battle of Kurukshetra. Our fight is different, but we are also fighting. We are fighting illusion. We are fighting ignorance. We are fighting atheism. We are fighting gross materialism. So yes, you are a businessman, you're a housewife, you're a student, doesn't matter what you're doing. Do your prescribed duty and at the same time go on thinking of the form of Krishna. That should be your motto of life. That is how to live your life every day. Everybody has so many duties to do. Krishna's not saying don't do them, but at the same time, think of him, remember him. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Attaining Krishna means coming into his association. Just like right now, we are virtually associating, which is why I tell everybody, turn on your camera. Please. How many times do I have to say it? Of course, my good disciples, they have complied. Thank you. Thank you. I want your association. Don't hide. You're beautiful. Show me your beauty. So in the same way, attaining Krishna means you will have his direct association. You have family members you associate. So if you live your life according to this motto, one day you will have direct association with Krishna. You may eat with him. You may play with him. You may dance with him. That's what I want to do. That's my ultimate goal. That's my deepest prayer, to be able to dance with Krishna. And of course, I want to eat with Krishna. But that dancing, yes. Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasananya gamina parang purushang divyang yati partanu chintayan. One who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, is sure to reach me, O Partha. So, now in the next section, Krishna will explain how you can meditate upon him. Of course, we recommend the simplest process, chanting. But there are ways to meditate on Krishna. And the trick is to get to the point where you are undeviating. You're always thinking of Krishna. So the next section is called Attaining the Supreme. Kaving Puranam Anushasitaram Anor Inyangsang Anusmaredyat Sarvasya Dattaram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnang Tamasaparastat. One should meditate on the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything. So this is how to understand what is God. There are so many conceptions of what is God. Here, Krishna is telling you, this is how to understand this word God. He knows everything. He is the oldest. He is the supreme controller. He is smaller than the smallest. He is the maintainer. He is beyond material conception. In other words, materially, you cannot conceive of Krishna. You cannot discover Krishna by any material means. He's not going to show up on TV one day. And you cannot discover a method to find out what is God. The method is given here in Bhagavad-gita. He is inconceivable. And he's always a person. Yes, the impersonal aspect is there, but that impersonal aspect is inferior and subordinate to the personal form. He is luminous like the sun. Yes, there are descriptions in the Bhagavatam. Narayana appears to the Devata, and Vishnu Narayan is compared to 1,000 suns. That's what it means to be luminous. And there's one prayer in the Isha Upanishad where the devotee prays, "My Lord, remove this dazzling effulgence so that I can see you as you are." Nina, I like your picture that you have. Very nice. You get a ding. Radha and very nice, Nina. See? That's why I want you guys to turn on your camera so that I can give you dings. Very good. And he is transcendental beyond this material nature, which means even when Krishna comes to this earth, he still remains transcendental. He's not affected by the material energy in the way we are. He always remains transcendental. Prayana kale manasachalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bruvor madhye pranam aveshya samyak satang parang purusham upaiti divyam. Now, Krishna is going back to the yogi, one who at the time of death fixes the life air between the eyebrows, and by the strength of yoga with an undeviating mind, engages in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the yogic way, but the devotee way is by chanting. No difference. The yogi fixes his mind on Krishna in this way, and the chanter, the Hare Krishna chanter, fixes the mind by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yadaksharang Vedavado Vadanti, Vishanti Yadyatayo Vita Raga, Yadinchanto Brahmacharyang Charanti, Tate Padang Sangrahena Pravakshe. Persons who are learned in the Vedas, who utter Omkar, and who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Again, Brahman is the impersonal, all-pervasive spiritual aspect of Krishna, his effulgence. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. So again, Krishna is reverting to the yogic situation. Sarvadwarani sanyamya manohridhi narudyacha murdni adyatmatmana pranang astito yogadharanam. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes oneself in yoga. Om iti ekaksharang brahma vyaharan mam anusmaran yak prayati tyajan dehang sayati paramangatim. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, which is the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits one's body, one will certainly reach the spiritual planets. So notice, yes, the yogi chants Om, but has to think of the form of Godhead. Now, the word Om, the way we understand Om as given to us by Prabhupada, 3 letters, A-U-M. A signifies Krishna, U stands for Radharani, and M stands for the living entities, the innumerable living entities. So if you look at Nina's screen, she has Radha and Krishna there in her picture. So Krishna is the letter A, thank you Nina. The letter U represented by Radha, and then all the living entities, Makar. That is the highest understanding of the word Om. There are many explanations. Some are by the impersonalist, and this explanation is the personalist explanation. Ananya Cheta Satatang Yomang Smarati Nityasha Tasyahang Sulabha Parata Nitya Yuktasya Yogana. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pratha, because of one's constant engagement in devotional service. So remembrance of Krishna is the third item of bhakti. First is hearing, which we're doing now. The second item is chanting or speaking or narrating about Krishna. And by doing constant hearing and chanting, you get to this third stage of always remembering Krishna no matter what happens. Anything that happens, a devotee who is practiced in hearing and chanting will immediately connect it to Krishna. It will immediately remind him of Krishna. An ordinary person sees a night, like where I go sometimes, there is a plumeria tree. So I take two plumeria flowers, and I place them on my altar. Now other people pass by the plumeria tree and they think of their girlfriend. But when I see that plumeria tree, I think, oh, here is something I can offer to Krishna. That's how a devotee is practiced. No matter what's going on, immediately in context, he thinks of Krishna. Mam upetyu punarjanma dukalaya mashaspatam napnuvanti mahatmana sangsiddhing paramangita. After attaining me, the great souls, Mahatmas, who are yogis in devotion, so that's what we are. We are also yogis, but not the Hatha yogis. We are bhakti yogis, okay? Or we are nam yogis, chanting yogis, okay? After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world. I don't know about you, but after this COVID, I am done. I do not want to come back. I'm fed up. I was fed up before, but now because of COVID, I am really fed up. Never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries. So the manufacturer, Krishna, is telling you right here, by the way, folks, Krishna is saying, I created this material world. I'm telling you, it's a temporary place full of miseries. Why do you want to remain there? Come back to my abode, which is not temporary and which is full of happiness. That's why this verse is so important. The manufacturer is telling you ahead of time, psst, by the way, this is not where you want to be. You want to be with me because they have attained the highest perfection. The next section, comparing the two natures. In Bhagavad-gita, there are two natures: material nature, spiritual nature. Those are the two natures, or prakritis, mentioned in Bhagavad-gita. Material and spiritual. Brahma bhuvana loka punar arvartinarjuna mam upetya takaunteya punar janma na vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. So, some people want to go to heaven, but that's still within the material realm, and you cannot stay in heaven forever, folks. You will have to die one day and come back to Cologne or wherever. So, doesn't matter. From Brahma's planet down to Patala, they all have this one thing in common: places of misery, to varying degrees, of course, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode never takes birth again. So this is repeated several times in Bhagavad-gita. If you achieve Krishna's abode, you don't come back. Permanent liberation. Sahasra yuga paryantam aharyad brahmano vidu ratring yuga sahasrantang teho ratra vidojana. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. Avyaktad vyaktaya sarva prabhavantyaha agame ratri agame praliyante taitravya vyakta sangyake. At the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from an unmanifest state, and thereafter when night falls, they are merged into the unmanifest again. Bhuta grama sa evayang bhutva praliyate ratri agame vashakparta pravavatyah argame. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. Keep in mind, he's talking about the material bodies, not the living entities themselves. We already learned, and we said it today, the living entity, the soul, is eternal, but the body that is continually changing. It is the body that dies, not the soul. Parastasmat tubhavonyo vyakto vyaktat sanatana yaksak sardeshu bhuteshu nashyatsu na vinashyati. Yet there is another unmanifest nature, which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. In other words, the spiritual world, which contains all the spiritual planets, is eternally existing. So that answers a question that comes up all the time. Prabhuji, when Krishna descends to this material world, is he absent in his spiritual abode? No. He's always present in his abode. It's just that he manifests himself once in a day of Brahma within this material realm. So the material realm is constantly going through creation, maintenance, and destruction. The energy itself, the material energy itself, is eternal, but the manifestation of the material energy, that's temporary. So this cosmic manifestation is constantly being created, maintained, destroyed, just like summer, winter, spring, fall, right? The material cosmic manifestation goes through these changes, but the energy itself remains. Even Einstein said the same thing. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It exists. Seems Einstein must have had some understanding of Bhagavad-gita, because this is what we're speaking about. The energy is eternal. The manifestation is different. Avyaktokshara ityuktas tam ahu paramangatim yang prapya na nivartante tadama paramang mama. So this line, tadama paramang mama, will be repeated in chapter 15. That which the Vedantists describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. That's where hopefully we want to go. Krishna's supreme abode. Tad Dhamma Paramang Mama. Krishna's personal abode. Purusha Sapara Parata Bhaktya Labhyas Tvananyaya Yasyantakstani Bhutani Yena Sarvam Idang Tata. Now this verse it's the conclusion of this verse, will be repeated at the end of chapter 11, and it will be repeated at the end of chapter 18. I will point out the line, Bhaktya Labhyas Tvananyaya. That is the conclusion of Bhagavad-gita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. That is the conclusion of Bhagavad-gita. You want to see God? Bhakti, devotion. You want to understand God? Bhakti, devotion. You want to go back to God and associate with Him? Bhakti, bhakti, bhakti. I'm sorry, there are no alternatives. This is what Bhagavad-gita is teaching. Bhakti, bhakti, bhakti. It's not my Bhagavad-gita. It's Krishna's Bhagavad-gita. I am simply Krishna's salesman. That's all I am. I am selling Krishna. And my job is to present Krishna's Bhagavad-gita. And now I've gone through Bhagavad-gita dozens of times. It never changes. This fact that God is attained only by bhakti, so far it's never changed. Final section of this chapter. 2 ways of passing away from this world. Yatra kale tvanavritim avriting chaiva yogina prayatayanti tankalang bhakshami bharatarshava. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. We're talking about the yogi. Now, I already said, you are also yogis. Hopefully, you are bhakti yogis. Agnir Jyotir Aha Shukla Shanmasa Uttarayanam Tatra Prayata Gachanti Brahma Brahma Vidojana. Those who know the supreme Brahman, that's Krishna, God, attain that supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery God, in the light, at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Dhumo ratris tata Krishna shanmasa dakshanayanam tatra chandramasang jyotir yogi prapya nivartate. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back, because The moon is one of the heavenly planets. You achieve the heavenly planets. It's like going on vacation. You can't stay on vacation forever. Eventually, you have to come back. Shukla Krishna gati hiyete jagata shaspate mate ekaya yatyanavritim ananya vartate puna. According to Vedic opinion, there are two ways of passing this world. One in light, one in darkness. When one passes in light, one does not come back. But when one passes in darkness, one returns. Now this next verse, to me, is more important than the previous few verses. Look at what Krishna says to Arjuna. Naiti sriti parachajanan yogi mukhyati kasyana tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. We already studied this line in verse number 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjana. Although the devotees know these two paths, Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, always be fixed in devotion. So even though Krishna mentioned previously now, different times the yogi, Krishna is telling Arjuna, don't worry about that. Just be fixed in devotion. Because he already stipulated prior to this in this chapter that if you think of him at the time of death, you're going back to Godhead. So don't be concerned, worried, oh, am I leaving this time or that? No. You just be fixed in devotion. As the line says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, meaning at all times remember Krishna. That is the big takeaway from this chapter. At all times remember Krishna. That's why we emphasize chanting, so that we get in the practice of always remembering Krishna. Final verse of this chapter, Vedeshu yagyeshu tapaksu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalang pratishtam atyeti tat sarvam idang viditva yogi parang stanam upaiti chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service, that's bhakti, is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. So yes, all these different processes yields a certain result. By studying the Vedas, you get one thing. By performing sacrifices, you get something. By giving in charity, you get something. By pursuing philosophical speculation, you get something. By engaging in fruitive activities, you get something. Krishna is saying here, if you engage in bhakti, devotional service, you won't be bereft. You'll get all of these benefits. Simply by performing devotional service, one attains all of these. That's why the bhakti process is superior. All these other processes, you only get one result. When you do bhakti, you get them all. We call that trifecta. You get them all. That's why this bhakti process is repeatedly emphasized by Krishna in Bhagavad-gita. And at the end, one reaches the supreme eternal abode, which has been mentioned several times in this chapter. Supreme eternal abode is Krishna's abode. And Krishna's abode is known as Goloka Vrindavan. All right. Now, before I do the Nishringa prayers, I want to remind you that next week we will begin chapter 9. That is going to take more than one class, because chapter 9 There's a lot of stuff to cover. So we'll have at least 2 classes on chapter 9. So I urge you to do homework, study chapter 9, so that when I do the class next week, you'll get more out of it. So now we will sing Nrsinga prayers so that we are protected. Namaste Narasimhaya Prahlada Klada Dayane Hiranya Kashipura Vaksha Shilatankana Kalaye Yito Nrsinga Padato Nrsinga Yato Yato Yamita To Nrsinga Bahir Nrsinga Hridaye Nrsinha Nrsinghamadim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsinghamadim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsinghamadim Sharanam Prapadye. I surrender to Krishna in his specific form as Narasingha, half man, half lion. Tavakara Kamala Vare Nakam Adbhuta Sringam Dalita Iranya Kashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. One last message. Friday begins the month of Kartik, Damodar. Very, very, very auspicious month. Read about Damodar Leela in Krishna book or 10th canto. Recite the prayer, if you can do it morning and evening, the Damodarashtakam prayer. Very, very, very auspicious. And get absorbed. For me, I'm going to do all my preaching starting Friday is going to be about Damodar, except we will do our Bhagavad-gita class. But all my other preaching will be, for the whole month, will be Damodar, Damodar, Damodar. By the end of the month, only Damodar will be flowing in my veins. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.